Mark Reynolds was forced out of sacred desert ruins by Victor Kane, a man willing to plunder history for profit. Kane's greed blinded him to the deeper truth those ruins held, and his arrogance threatened something far greater than treasure. But a stray dog's mysterious guidance led Mark to uncover an ancient pact that changed everything. Just listen to how shocking the turn of events in this drama was, and why justice ultimately prevailed. The sun was sinking behind a horizon of endless dunes, painting the Nevada desert in molten gold and bruised purple. The heat of the day still clung stubbornly to the sand, and every breath Mark Reynolds drew felt like inhaling warm smoke. His boots crunched softly against loose grains, the sound swallowed by the vast silence around him. His shoulders sagged under the weight of his pack, not just filled with water and supplies, but with memories he could never unload. Mark was not walking without purpose. In truth, he didn't fully understand what he was chasing. It wasn't treasure or fame or even closure in the way people spoke of it. It was something more fragile, harder to name, a fragment of peace he'd lost somewhere in the years that had slipped past since leaving service. The war was behind him, but the shadows lingered. The desert stretched like a living thing, shifting, endless, secretive. He had been walking for hours. His throat burned, and his boots felt heavier with each step. Then, without warning, movement caught his eye. A figure appeared ahead, half hidden by the heat waves rising from the sand. At first, Mark thought it was a trick of light, but as he blinked, the shape took form. A dog. Not just any dog. This one was lean, covered in matted golden fur that shimmered in the dying light, and her eyes were striking. They held a depth he couldn't name, an intelligence that made him stop in his tracks. The dog did not flinch at his presence. She simply stood still, her gaze fixed on him, as though she understood something beyond sight. Mark stared back, unsure why her presence stirred something strange inside him, curiosity mixed with unease. Then, as suddenly as she appeared, she turned. Her movement was fluid, almost purposeful, and she began walking east toward a section of dunes Mark hadn't noticed before. She stopped briefly, glanced back over her shoulder, and tilted her head, a silent invitation. Mark frowned. "You want me to follow?" he murmured aloud, more to himself than to her. The desert was no place for chasing shadows, and yet something in her gaze rooted him to the spot. Against all reason, against every instinct telling him to keep his own course, he stepped forward. The dog turned and disappeared into the shifting dunes. Mark followed. Every step drew him deeper into a world that seemed untouched by time. The air grew cooler as the light dimmed, the silence thicker. They passed worn-out trails and gullies shaped by winds no human hand had touched for centuries. Mark's pace quickened, though not from urgency, from something else. Compulsion. After nearly an hour, the dog halted. Mark slowed beside her, breathing heavier than before. Before them lay something unexpected. Rising from the sand was the faint outline of stonework, structures half swallowed by dunes, their edges rounded by centuries of wind and silence. The ruins stood as if holding their own breath, watching him approach. Mark crouched at the threshold. The air smelled of dust and something older, something almost sacred. The dog sat beside him, silent, her golden fur brushing his sleeve. Her eyes glistened strangely in the low light, reflecting something almost human, an unspoken knowing. Mark swallowed hard. The desert was vast, mysterious, dangerous. Yet, at that moment, he felt an unshakable pull toward those ruins. His heart beat in a strange rhythm, an echo of something buried deep within him. Whatever lay beyond that threshold was bigger than him, bigger than war, bigger than regret. He did not know why, but he knew. The dog had not just found him by chance. She had chosen him for a reason. And without another word, Mark stepped forward. Mark stepped through the threshold of the ruins with cautious reverence. The air inside was cooler, heavy with the scent of ancient stone and something faintly metallic, like salt on the air after a storm. Dust swirled at his boots, caught in stray beams of light that pierced cracks in the crumbling roof above. Somewhere deep inside, the wind seemed to whisper, not in words, but in a language older than memory. The architecture astonished him. Walls curved in ways no modern builder would dare, covered in symbols carved deep and deliberate. Strange chambers branched away like veins in stone, each doorway inviting and forbidding at once. In the center of the largest chamber stood an altar. It was small, but it radiated a soft light, pale and pulsing, as though breathing. Mark paused. His heart beat faster. This place felt sacred. Not in the way churches or monuments felt sacred, but in the way a wound felt sacred. Something deeply personal, dangerous, and unforgettable. Before he could step further, movement drew his attention. From a shadowed corner came footsteps, not cautious, but confident, deliberate. He froze. A group of men emerged, their boots echoing softly on the stone. At their head was a tall man, dressed in expensive gear, his jacket patched with insignias from far-off places. His grin was sharp, calculating. This was Victor Kane. Mark had heard the name whispered in circles he'd avoided after leaving service. A man who collected relics, not for history, but for profit. "What's your plan here, soldier?" Kane's voice was low but edged with mockery. He stepped forward, scanning the chamber as if it belonged to him. "These ruins are mine. That dog, she won't save you." Mark's first reaction was anger, a heat rising in his chest that made him clench his fists. This was more than trespassing. It was a violation of something sacred. Kane wasn't here to learn. He was here to take. But then his eyes found her. The dog. She sat perfectly still, her gaze fixed on Kane with an intensity that made Mark stop breathing for a moment. There was no fear in her stance, only calm, and something else, a quiet determination. She stood and padded toward Mark, brushing against his leg, her eyes never leaving Kane's. The movement was deliberate. Mark felt the weight of it in his bones. She was not just guiding him here by accident, she was protecting him. A strange warmth spread in Mark's chest. Compassion, he realized, rising like a tide he could no longer hold back. He looked down at her, this scruffy animal who had appeared from nowhere, and understood something in her eyes. She carried wounds he recognized, wounds of survival, of battle fought in silence, of being lost and still walking forward. Mark crouched slightly, reaching to stroke her coarse fur. She leaned into his touch, as if answering something unspoken between them. "You've been leading me here for a reason," he whispered softly, not to Kane, but to her. "And I'm going to find out why." Kane stepped closer, his boots clicking against the stone. "Don't get sentimental, soldier. This isn't your story." Mark ignored him. His eyes were fixed on the dog. In her silent devotion, he saw a mirror of himself, loyal beyond reason, wounded but unwilling to give up, searching for something he couldn't yet name. She wasn't just a guide. She was a companion who carried her own scars and her own purpose. For the first time since stepping into the desert, Mark felt something shift inside him. The anger that Cain stirred was now tempered with a deeper feeling, compassion. It was no longer just about what lay inside these ruins. It was about understanding why they had been brought here at all. He straightened. Cain's grin faltered under Mark's steady gaze. Mark knew this was no longer just a confrontation over treasure. This was the beginning of something far greater, a bond, a discovery, and a test that neither of them yet understood. And the dog, ever silent, sat watching them both, as though guarding something only she knew. Victor Kane's voice echoed in the chamber as he stepped forward, his boots grinding softly against the ancient stone. "Walk away, veteran. This is bigger than you." His grin was sharp, almost triumphant. Without another word, he motioned to his crew, and they began to move in, forcing Mark backward. A sudden cloud of dry sand whipped through the entrance, stinging Mark's face and settling in his eyes. He blinked against it, coughing softly. Cain's figure slipped away into the shadows of the ruins, his laughter lingering like a threat. Mark stumbled out into the night air, shielding his face. The desert around him was silent again, the heat of the day replaced by a cool stillness. His boots crunched softly on sand, each step heavy with frustration. Cain's words echoed in his mind. "This is bigger than you." Mark's eyes drifted toward the chamber. The faint glow of the altar still pulsed inside. Something inside him refused to leave. No matter Cain's threats, no matter the odds stacked against him, his mind was locked on one thing, that altar. Later that night, the desert became a quiet cathedral of stars. Mark sat cross-legged a few paces from the ruins, the dog curled beside him. Her golden fur gleamed softly under the pale light of the moon. She lay still, her breathing steady, her eyes half closed. Mark stared into the darkness, his mind drifting back to memories he had tried to bury. The faces of his lost comrades, the sound of boots on foreign soil, the scent of dust and steel, the battles he had fought, and the lives that slipped through his fingers. A weight settled over him, deeper than fatigue. Despair. Maybe Cain was right. Maybe some things were beyond repair. Some doors should remain closed. Some wounds could never heal. He let out a breath that felt like surrender. "Maybe I should just walk away," he whispered, his voice lost in the vast silence of the desert. The dog stirred beside him, her paw brushing the sand. She lifted her head, ears alert. Then, almost deliberately, she stepped closer to a section of the ruin's outer wall. She pawed at something buried beneath the sand, scratching with quiet insistence. Mark frowned. "What is it, girl?" he asked softly, kneeling beside her. His fingers brushed the grainy surface until they found something solid, a slab of stone, worn smooth by time. The dog stayed still, watching him. With effort, Mark pried the stone loose. Beneath it lay an object wrapped in faded cloth, brittle with age. His breath caught as he revealed what was hidden, a small chest, carved from stone and etched with intricate patterns. It seemed impossibly ancient. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside lay a bundle of brittle scrolls and, resting on top, a carved medallion that glowed faintly in the moonlight. The glow pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. Mark unrolled the scrolls with reverence. The inscriptions were in a language he didn't understand, yet somehow their meaning seeped into him. Symbols of protection, words of courage, an ancient pact, a covenant for those who had lost their way. Mark felt something shift deep inside him. Despair cracked like thin glass breaking. His chest tightened. The air seemed to hum around him. He looked down at the dog. Her eyes met his, steady and unwavering. For the first time, Mark understood. She had not found him by chance. She had chosen him, not for himself, but for something greater. The weight in his chest shifted into something heavier, yet clearer, a purpose. Mark tucked the scrolls carefully into his pack, the medallion warm in his palm. He rose, brushing sand from his sleeves. The ruins stood silent behind him, but Mark knew the night had changed him. He whispered softly to the dog, "I think we've both been led here for a reason." The dog's tail gave a faint wag, and Mark felt something he hadn't felt in years, a spark of hope. At dawn, the desert was washed in pale gold, the dunes glowing like quiet embers. The ruins stood still, their ancient stones catching the first light of day. Mark Reynolds tightened his grip on the medallion, its warmth pulsing softly against his chest. The dog sat a few feet away, her ears perked, her gaze fixed on the entrance of the chamber where Victor Kane waited. Kane stepped forward, flanked by his crew. His smug grin carried the certainty of a man who believed the world was his to take. "You've got nothing, soldier," he said. His voice was low, but there was steel in it. "These ruins belong to me. Everything in here, the power, the history, it's mine to claim." Mark took a deep breath, steadying himself. He met Kane's gaze with something different this time, not anger, not fear, but certainty. "You think this is about treasure?" he said quietly, his voice carrying across the chamber. "It's about hope." Kane laughed, but it was sharp and uneasy. "Hope? That's rich." Mark stepped forward, the medallion glowing brighter against his chest, a gentle warmth spreading outward. The ruins trembled beneath them, a low hum rising through the air like the heartbeat of something alive. Kane hesitated. The dog rose to her feet and let out a low, steady growl, her gaze fixed on him. Mark's voice grew louder. "This place is not yours to exploit." His conviction rang through the silence of the chamber. "It's not about possession. It's about what we protect and what we leave behind." The sound of the ruins shifting underfoot filled the air. Kane's grin faltered. His crew exchanged uncertain glances, their confidence wavering. Mark felt a calm settle over him, a strength that had nothing to do with his training or his years in battle. This was something deeper, acceptance. He stepped fully into the chamber, the medallion pulsing softly as if responding to his presence. Light spread from it, washing over the altar, illuminating the strange carvings in the stone. Kane stepped back instinctively, his hands tightening on the straps of his pack. Mark did not flinch. He stood taller, rooted to the ground, and spoke once more. "This is bigger than any of us. It's a gift, and it's a responsibility. I will not let it fall into the wrong hands." The words hung in the air. Kane's crew shifted again, the tension breaking like a snapped cord. One by one, they stepped away, leaving Kane standing alone. He looked from the glowing altar to Mark, and then back at the dog. For the first time, there was doubt in his eyes. The veteran lowered his gaze to the dog. She wagged her tail once, a quiet acknowledgment of what had passed between them. Then she turned and walked away, her paws vanishing into the rolling sands beyond the ruins. Mark watched her disappear, the warmth of the medallion still pulsing against his chest. Silence settled around him again, but it was not the emptiness of despair. It was the stillness of peace. He stepped forward to the altar. The light bathed him in its glow, and for a moment everything felt still. The years of fighting, the weight of loss, the battles inside himself, all of it had led him here. Mark lowered his hand, clutching the medallion tightly. For the first time in years, he felt something he had not dared to hope for: peace. Not because the battle was won, but because he had found something worth protecting. The desert stretched endlessly before him, the ruins standing silent and eternal. Mark took one last look around, then turned and walked away. He carried with him the truth he had uncovered, that the greatest victory was not in taking, but in safeguarding what mattered most. And somewhere beyond the dunes, the dog vanished completely, leaving Mark alone, but not empty. His war was over.